Welcome to Show Me Yours. In this episode, we get the opportunity to talk with Amber and Austin Richmans of Cambio Yoga. In this episode, we reflect on leadership, a lot of lessons learned. And as Austin said, it was a series of 1,000 paper cuts that they had to go through as they built up Cambio and self-reflected on who they are and how they showed up in their community. In addition, we get the unique privilege of talking with them about the mastery and the use of their mission and how their mission was their guiding light for decision making, as well as building the business and their community and how it played a pivotal part in all things Cambio. So stay tuned as I get to introduce you to Amber and Austin of Cambio Yoga. Welcome to Show Me Yours. I am your co-host, Rihanna Werner. I'm sitting here with my fabulous, soon-to-be famous Jason Sheffield, who's my Jason. Hi, my Jason.
Hi.
My co-host, Jason Sheffield. And I get the great privilege of introducing more friends of mine because, I want to pretend like I'm popular. But I have had the privilege of making friends with you guys, years ago. I got to walk into Cambio. That was right amidst the pandemic, wasn't it, Amber? We walked in.
It was just before.
Was it just before?
Yeah, it was. We had, we found you after a situation in late 2019.
That's right.
So, oh my
It
goodness,
was.
That's a long time ago. Wow.
It was.
Yeah.
I feel like we've gone through so much life.
So much life.
We have. We've gone through a pandemic together.
Yeah.
I mean,
Survived the pandemic.
But I have my good friends, Amber and Austin Richmans of Cambio Yoga. They are the co-founders of Cambio. And if you're not familiar with Cambio, they are a yoga studio, dual yoga studios, plural now, dedicated to creating accessibility for all to yoga. Donation-based. Right.
Yeah.
Accessible features. You guys train yoga teachers. I mean, you guys do it all in the name of yoga and community, which is just sings to my heart.
Yeah, we try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Cambio. Give us just kind of a just 30-second, who the heck are ya?
Oh, I feel like you're good at this.
All right. Yeah. Well, we're a donation-based yoga studio that has been in town for 15 years. We've got 2 locations. I mean, our guiding principles are community, education, and accessibility. And we're always expanding the broadening definitions of what those terms mean to be continually inclusive and serviceable. Yeah.
I'm curious, just frankly, in the beginning, how did you guys start? I mean, 15 years ago.
It was her idea.
Yeah, well, just take us back to the original.
It was a lifetime ago. I had lived in Seattle for a while and took some donation classes. And then one of my teacher trainees locally had donation classes through her, just her house. And I was like, this is really cool. I was a school teacher. And you did all kinds of teaching in various jobs. And it's like, even as yoga teachers and people with careers, yoga was just not accessible to us. And thinking about how many barriers there were for other people then. I mean, finances is just one barrier, right? And so it just kind of honestly happened as a whim. I don't think we ever thought it would be our actual jobs.
No.
And it was just this thing where there was a need for it in the community, and we really wanted to create just a welcoming, just real heartfelt community with really high quality yoga. And the donation piece was really important, and really we got laughed at quite a bit at the time. Trying to get loans
just
and
spent
things.
a lot of time explaining what that was. Like people just were like, what is that?
Yeah.
It's
How does
very
that work?
unique. Especially 15 years ago, kind of very fresh an idea of this idea of the.
I mean, it was for me. I was like,
He didn't.
I was like, this is never going to work. but you're my big sister, and I do what you say. So let's roll.
Can you train my brother?
No, that's how we've always been. She's like, you ready for an adventure? And I go, I guess I am. I guess
But
we
then
are.
he usually outgrows me within it, and I wind up learning from him. So it's a really good, we have that good mutual, there's a lot of reciprocity in that way. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited to dig more into that and what you guys have learned, but let's throw it to some rapid fire
Are you
questions.
ready?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fire.
Let's
All
really
right.
get to know Amber and Austin here. Okay. So they know questions are coming, but they don't know which one. I think I'm going to ask. I mean, this is yoga. We got to go slightly. You guys are different and weird. So
Yeah.
tell me about the weirdest thing you guys did to kickstart Cambio.
There's a lot of weird things we did,
Yeah.
actually. Do you have one off the top of your head you want to go with?
I have so many.
You pick one, and then I'll pick one. How-
Weird. I mean, I think it's
call.
weird to start a donation-based yoga studio when, with just like a very low limit credit card is all we had.
And during a recession.
During a
Yeah.
recession,
So the whole thing
no
was weird.
loan, no nothing. Just like, okay, let's build some walls, put up some mirrors, put in a floor, and then just literally build a thing in the air and see if it flew, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, we would hold like community events. We were throwing things to see what would stick. Like I remember one time we had a tailgate party, and it was so well received. I think we had one person's truck tail down with a Coleman grill, and there were like 4 people there. So that was pretty. One time we did a poetry reading in the parking lot, where it's like literally a circle of people on the parking lot on Austin Bluffs. Cars just driving by, and we're like reading Edgar Allan Poe to each other. And,
Or their own poems, and you
Yeah,
know the
or
whole,
their own-
like,
yeah.
just-
we've had bouncy houses for birthday parties and
a water slide.
blow
A
up
big
water slide.
Blow up water slide that we rented for a party.
In June, and it was like the coldest day of the year, and it was like the
No.
most
Yeah.
freezing water slide. And I think me and another person were the only people who actually went down the water
Oh,
slide.
I went down it.
Did you go down
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Oh.
But I regretted it.
Yeah,
we
I think
all
we're the
did,
only,
we all did.
I think he and I were the only ones who repeated it. So yeah, it was like ice plunge before ice plunging.
Yeah.
yeah,
But it was cool.
yeah, before it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was it though. Like just in the early days, just our whole thing was anything to get people through the front door, even because so many people, especially back then, there were fears around yoga and what it was and everything else. I mean, this was 2009. It was a very different world. And so just have a wine tasting. Okay, maybe someone will come. And we actually
Beer
did
brewery.
we had people come who never had done yoga, who are still part of the community from like
A wine tasting.
Wow.
Pumpkin carvings, beer brewing.
Yeah, things we wouldn't do now.
I had my band just play one time. We're like, come on in, and we'll just play really loud music in your face, and you have nowhere to go.
Yeah, it was just we had First Fridays, we had art that rotated through. We just anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to also just again that touched on that whole community piece and just being more than just a place to come make weird shapes with your body.
Okay, I have to
Yeah.
ask a follow-up to this because this is fun. What's the one event that you threw that makes you cringe? Where you're like, oh. Amber, I heard you say, you're like, a lot of the stuff we probably wouldn't do now.
Yeah, I think
mean,
because it didn't.
whatever.
I think it mostly because it didn't work. It was just not.
Some of them, the partying got out of control in the early days, and that makes me cringe now because that just doesn't feel like who we are or what we're trying to put out in the world, and it got it could get there. Things got wild sometimes. I think. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm just old now, but
yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, I'm thinking of we used to our senior teachers. We would ask them if they wanted to do like an event, a community event, and sometimes we would attach it to a fundraiser.
Yes.
And I remember one of our teachers did one that was just so abominably bad in terms of just show out. Like one person came to the thing, and he made flyers and like put his heart and soul into it. And
was
so
so
I don't know if
depressed.
cringy is the right, but I just remember us just sitting on the curb, just being like, it's okay, like it's fine. And just learning that, like, I think early on that, like, you can't be cringy. We're doing something different. We're kind of forging our own path in the forest, and we're going to do 10 things, and 7 of them probably aren't going to work. And if you get caught up in the cringiness of that, then you probably should just go on the trail.
Yeah.
So we learned pretty quick to just let it roll off our back if it wasn't working.
Yeah, definitely have to set your ego aside to start a business.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do a card. Which one do you guys want to choose?
I will.
Okay, Amber's
you
pulling
want-
the
should I
card.
read it?
Yeah,
Yes,
read it.
please.
Okay. Is it worse to discover your fly is down? Oh, this was on your first episode.
Oh,
Oh,
is
well,
it
then we gotta
really?
do a different
oh,
one.
we've got to do
I'm
a
like,
different
I watched it.
Here.
I did my homework.
Here, I'll take that. That should
Those
go
cards are famous.
Yeah.
What's
We've only pulled 3.
Yeah, I know the randomness of
that's
that.
funny, right?
Yeah.
What's the most unusual gift you've received?
Well,
Nothing's coming to my mind.
I've got one.
Okay.
When we started our second location, the Pikes Peak location, it was a huge undertaking, a lot of renovation. And one day somebody just walked in and was like, "You've got a lot of windows in this place." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You got a lot of windows." We're like, "Yeah." He goes, "What are you going to do for blinds?" I was like, "Blinds." We had so many things like that we were thinking about that when he was like blinds, we were like, we have not even thought about blinds. And he said, he was like, "Well, how about we gift you blinds for this place, like the roller ones?"
Yeah.
I mean, we have a ton of windows, and yeah, that was incredibly generous.
That's
Yeah.
remarkable. Who is this generous soul? And please tell me he got like 1,000 hugs.
Oh yeah, we did.
Wow.
We still have an ongoing trade with his employees or getting yoga and things like that.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Escorts and whatnot. No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I don't know.
Not people
if
escorts. Escorts to
I don't know.
studio.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks for the clarification, Austin.
Speaking of weird gifts.
We did have a certain kind of massage studio next door for a long time, and we would get visitors who would come in and be confused about what we were about. I mean, we have stories.
We had a massage table that we
Yeah.
had a room that we'd rent
and
out.
we'd
so
have to send gentlemen
people would go to that
away.
and think it was the one that ended up getting shut down by feds.
It got raided.
Oh,
It
wow.
got
Did
raided.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah, when
It
we
was
had
pretty-
teachers there,
it
they
was
saw
pretty.
it.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
so
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. That was an interesting day at work.
Yeah, it was an interesting day at work.
Wow.
There's some, I mean, not all small businesses in Colorado Springs are doing legal things, I suppose you could say. Yeah.
we found out.
That's true.
We found
Yeah.
out.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
Do you have a
that's-
unique gift, Amber, that you thought of?
Well, it's just along the same lines. I think we just we have people just show up in these like amazing ways again and again and again and again. And when we first opened the studio, we had just this downstairs space at Austin Bluffs, and we had this guy who was just like, "I love painting. Can I come help you out by painting?" And he painted and painted and painted, and then we never saw him. We were like, "We'll give you yoga for life," and he's like, "No, I just am really into painting."
Yeah.
Wow.
So, because it was a lot of do it
And
yourself.
we were not.
didn't hire people. Yeah, we were
Well,
like,
we
okay.
were not into painting, so this
We
dude
were
saved
like,
our
oh,
skin. Yeah.
And we had to do everything over, and
Good. Yeah, we had like a
So-
start date for the initial opening and get the painting done, the floor in, and all this stuff. And he was like a Zen. It was like a spiritual practice for him. He would just come in and he wouldn't use any other materials. He would just eyeball it, and his lines were. I mean, he wouldn't tape things off.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Wow. So when you say painting, like painting the walls, not
Yeah.
a mural.
Yes.
no,
or
just the walls.
Oh my
just came in
gosh.
and painted, and they needed several coats because we did a color that shouldn't have been on top of another. The whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It was a
and
lesson.
so I think over the years, just I mean, people have been so generous and just given and contributed in their own way, whatever that is, and it's been and
Countless
usually
ways.
very humbling and very
Yeah.
just like wow. So I don't even know about weird or funny gifts, but just really surprising and like wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that speaks to who you guys are, though. Don't you find what you put into the world, it returns back to you? It goes to show your generosity and your giving and your creation of community. And the world is responding to that, which is pretty spectacular.
Well, thank you. That's kind of
Yeah.
you to say. Thank you.
Well, I've seen it in action, so, I've been a witness.
All right,
All
so our
right.
last question. A billboard is going up on I-25, and every person in Colorado Springs is going to be driving by and seeing it. What would your message be?
Yoga for all.
Mm.
I mean, that's our mission, really.
Yeah, yoga's for all, and you can find it here.
Or a statement,
In
maybe
here.
also. Maybe it doesn't have to be marketing. I'm curious,
Oh,
like
okay.
also of like, is there a statement you would want the world to see or understand or to contemplate or to a phrase that comes to mind for you where you're like, I want everyone to see this phrase?
No. That my brain doesn't work that way.
No?
It just doesn't. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think on our website, on the mission statement, it says, everyone is perfect the way they are. And yet you can still, and yet there is still work to do. So, yeah, I mean, simple platitudes like that. Give yourself grace. I mean, I think that'd probably be a big statement for us to see. If we were driving past the billboard,
Yeah.
I think we are very hard on ourselves sometimes as leaders and business owners. So if
Right,
it was for
yourself
us,
grace.
if it was for us, it'd be like, give yourself some grace. And that might extend to other people. But I think consistently when people do the deep work at yoga, oftentimes what they need to kind of be revealed to within themselves, not even necessarily hear from us, but just get to the truth around is that everything is okay and they are enough. People just need to be reminded oftentimes through one way or the other that they've got all the answers with them in them and they're enough.
You are enough.
Yep.
That's a good one. I
That's
like that.
good.
I'll go with that.
There
That's
you
my
go.
answer.
All right.
All right, time to pitch in on that billboard.
Yeah, let's get it.
I'm game.
Let's get it.
That is awesome. Well, you guys have been preparing. They even had a meeting to talk about this podcast. And I am so excited to hear what this meeting resulted in.
Yes.
So show me yours.
Well, it was a loose meeting.
was
I
a-
know,
it
don't
was a
have your
puppy play date.
expectations too high. Yeah. It was
Oh,
actually,
man.
it was a puppy play date. And so,
Yeah. So
we
we
were
just
a little
got, yeah.
distracted. Our dogs were.
It was really about the puppies.
Well, puppies usually matter the
Yeah.
most.
They won out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Baxter. He runs the office.
He's
So
the boss.
he totally is. You know, he'll go into my staff's office and he'll sit there and like bark at them until they give him a treat. Now, he has everybody here trained, I think, except
Oh.
for Jason, myself,
Yeah.
and Brian. He has everybody else trained to bring in treats for him.
He
Yeah.
hasn't gotten you trained yet.
Yeah, no, I set a boundary between Baxter and I. I said, nope, you can go to others for that.
It's a rare person smarter than a small dog.
That's what I was saying.
So, Amber and Austin, since you put a lot of thought into this, which I appreciate, let's dive into the core of the content here today. What was that big mistake that you made as you were starting or running Cambio? What did it look like, feel like? Let's dive in.
Yeah, I think as we talked about this, we honestly couldn't pinpoint one. There was not one big where we're like, this was it. I think, though, we were able to look at areas where we've had the most growth, right? As individuals and as leaders, and how that there tends to be lots of mistakes in that broad area because, well, if that's where the growth is, that's probably where the mistakes have been.
Yeah.
And so and for both of us, it really boiled down to leadership and to lessons learned in leadership. And it's some of it's the same, but some of it's quite different for me than it is for
Yeah.
him. And I don't know. Do you want to speak to yours first, or do you want me to?
Well, I mean, I just have a lot of different scenarios. I think it depends on what season of the learning, because we're always growing, we're always learning how to be better leaders, how to be better stewards of the mission. And so I was just reflecting on, like, a year ago, what I was really learning and being challenged by was how my thinking around the community we built, what I was building was, on one hand, the community is what we would want the community to be. But as a leader, it's not for you. And that was a real lesson of maturity that I'm still learning. So it's a lot of it is, I think the biggest mistake is expectation. I've been wrong the entire time for 15 years. I mean, from the get-go, when she was like, let's start a donation-based yoga. And my expectation was, well, let's do it, but this ain't going to work. To, oh, this is working, so this is what this means. And it's like, no, still wrong, still wrong, still wrong. But slowly you kind of go back and forth from learning what's not working along with what is working, and you refine kind of a specific focus. So yeah, for me, I think showing up in community in a way where, for me, Cambio is about serving, and I want the community to be serviceable for people. When I need to be served, that's not my role there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I have to look for other resources for that. So that's, I don't know if that's a big, juicy, fat mistake, but it's something that there was a lot of emotion around in learning how to navigate the piece of you that needs certain things in your life as a human being, a feeling human being, a sensitive person, and knowing what the privilege that comes along with such a wonderful role that I get to be in the community.
I think, Austin, that's really profound. Like it takes me back to, so much, especially in myself and supporting our clients and stuff, because we all have a perception of reality, right? Mm-hmm. We all know reality or perception is reality. And the problem with leadership is in our own mind is, well, if this person can lead me the way I want to be led, or I'm leading this person the way I want to be led. But here's the problem with that is that you trying to lead me the way you want to be led isn't meeting how I need to be led.
Yes.
Which is so hard to do, because that requires us to get out of our own mind. Mm-hmm. First, acknowledge that we need to get out of our own mind, and then learn about the needs of others. And as a leader, every single person you lead is very different.
Yes.
And then you guys as community leaders, understanding the community as a greater whole and meeting their needs, which is very different than individual needs too.
Yeah. Well, and you've got one more complex layer to juggle, which is teachers' needs, students' needs.
Yeah.
And those are sometimes separate. And then, yes, like you're saying, the individuals within both of those communities, and then the larger context within both of those communities. And then the larger community, both of those colliding represents. So it's really quite a calculus sometimes.
So you're really set up for failure.
All the time. But I think that's why we struggled with this question so much, because I think very early on, we had to reframe the context of how we define the word failure. And it's a learning opportunity, really. I mean, it's generic and cliche, but like, if you are taking those moments as failures, if you're filing them in your brain as failures, you're just never, it's going to burn you out or tear you down, or where it's not, when you do something like this for 15 years, and that's part of the beauty of running it with one of my favorite people and somebody I believe in so much and who believes in me, is that there are times where you're just beat down because you're like, I have effed this up time and time again. And it's, luckily we have a synergy where oftentimes where one of us is feeling down or wrongheaded about it or whatever, the other person can support, hold space for, and sometimes guide, or just simply allow that person to have their process with their own learning journey long enough to be able to get to that place where you're refreshed again about it and carry forward.
Yeah, I don't know how people do it on their own. I think that a lot with business owners who don't have like either someone just by their side or a staff where they're just really in it together, and which we also certainly have that as well. But yeah.
It's a lonely place. It is.
It can be,
and it can certainly be isolating if you don't have someone. So totally understand that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, community is really hard for any business owner that's out there has been trying to build community, or they want to have community in their business. Dealing with human beings isn't easy. And so I'm curious, like, as you guys reflect on 15 years of community building as your business model, frankly, right? I mean, on some levels, like donation based, it being a community. What were some of those maybe kind of mistakes or learnings that you had around what does it mean to build healthy community? Like, where did you go down one path of thinking, oh, this is what community is going to look like, maybe to be surprised and realize, oh, that didn't work, but it became into this other thing or whatever. But tell me a little bit about kind of those lessons learned of leadership as community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know you've been talking, but I feel like this falls into what you were just talking about with yourself. So it's actually a good one.
And this interview is slowly going to be, for the listener, death by 1,000 paper cuts, because it's going to be a lot of these little iterations of these lessons that are very, but I think, like I was speaking about, the tip of the spear right now is about realizing, wow, we've really created this community that I've always wanted to have. And now, but to foster it, I actually don't get the benefit of the community in the way that it needs to be, and my role needs to be in it. But early on, I think some of those lessons around developing community were, well, very early on, it was about realizing what isn't important to people, and that the efforts that we're making are, just superfluous, like, the tailgate party and things like that. Like, being able to really focus it in on what is the gift that yoga gives. So it's not, there is a context that is always kind of communities under the umbrella of yoga all the time. So to me, when I talk about fostering and creating this community that I've always wanted, if I were to break it down into what it is a community where you show up under the assumption that everybody else is showing up as their best self, and you're putting your best self foot forward as well. And if everybody has that kind of just assumption adopted, we're already elevating what community writ large is, right, in the world. So it's already kind of a special container for people to feel a sense of safety, empowerment, and connection in a way that creates an unspoken understanding. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of what all the mistakes have kind of led us towards. But yeah, in the early days, it was a lot of like putting energy towards efforts that didn't stack up to anything. It was also not realizing that the elephant in the room is the yoga. Like it's not about the poetry or this or that. It's like the yoga is the thing that is healing for people. It's the thing that is comforting to people. And it is the thing that puts people also on a growth edge. And sometimes as adults, it's so easy to get into a state of overwhelm around everything else you've got to juggle. The last thing you want to do when you have your free time is like, now I got to learn more and grow more. And by the way, within that realm is also like healing. And that's exhausting when you don't have a vehicle that allows that to happen pretty unconsciously, but also with a lot of gift and joy and compassion and kindness and grace involved with it that yoga provides. So I think early days, it was about trying to figure out this problem of like, how do we create this kind of community, when the answer was kind of staring us in the face. It's like, oh, well, yoga.
Right. Well, and I think within that is the idea that you cannot be everything to everyone. And that doesn't mean they can't be a part of the community in their way too, but you can't, at least for me, one of my struggles and mistakes I've made has been around, it's kind of twofold really, but one of them has really been around just, I think our MO in life in general shows up in leadership. And I definitely can be a people pleaser. And so for me, it's like, especially in the early days, there was some lady who wanted to do some kind of special pelvic floor class for people and all, and she's like, you need this. And she got so mad at me because I was like, this doesn't fit our schedule and this isn't going to work. And no, and and then there'd be things like, well, okay, these people want to host a belly dancing class. Okay, sure. But, or what, there was an African drumming class, and just kind of like opening the doors maybe too wide again, and getting back to just, no, what we do is yoga, and there can be community around that, and there can be ways to bring in bits and pieces of that, but it's also that there needs to be a focus. And and there needs to be choices. So you're saying yes to the yoga, you might need to say no to other things that you allow in. And that even means as far as behaviors and things you will allow and tolerate and where you draw boundaries. I think boundaries is a huge thing to learn as a business owner, and particularly when there's community, because of friendships. And because you, even if you work with someone but you're not necessarily friends, there is just this real care and there's this common worldview that sometimes can get hard to when someone doesn't see how you're seeing things, to be like, no, here's the line. And that, I think for me, and that's an ongoing lesson, is where are those boundaries and expressing them properly and not going, because I've had times where I think when you have boundary when it's hard for you to express those, or you're learning to express them, you can go from being too soft to then being like, well, next time I'll correct it, and you overcorrect and you're like, oh my gosh, I was such a jerk. Yeah. Like I was just like, I had times where I'm like, and we talked about this too, like where I have had in my mind what I think a business owner should be, and that's not who I am.
Yeah.
And so I've had times where I'm like, well, I need better boundaries here. And so I've been stiff and firm and and a little too much like this. And I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I would have rather actually erred on the side of being too soft and I certainly have done that too. And that's bit me in the butt many times. But yeah, so I guess it's negotiating all of that. It's this ongoing thing between having genuine care and love for the people in your community and who you work with. And also there's this business, and then there's yoga and it as a tradition and honoring it.
Yeah, the philosophy.
Yeah.
Well, and that makes it complicated because when we're creating all these things and making these decisions, I spoke with somebody recently. I was like, if we wanted to do this to get rich, we would have had to change our approach and what we were doing a long, long, long time ago. The decisions Amber's talking about, the boundaries that you make, it's to maintain solvency within the community and protect the yoga philosophy, the principles that yoga philosophy is built on, and it's always future forward for something greater than us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it interesting because, of course, we've all worked with leaders in our past lives and our current lives and stuff. And I always find that everybody points back to a particular leader in their life, whether it was the best leader that they ever worked with or the worst leader that they worked with, right? And you always do your best to either overcorrect that worst leader or super align with that best leader. Can you guys pinpoint someone in your life where it doesn't matter which way, but is there someone you think of in your mind when it comes to leadership?
I know. Our mom.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Your
Oh, for
mom?
sure. Awesome.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about her.
Well, yeah, no,
What
I
do you
mean,
wanna say about
she
that?
raised two, kids by herself and worked full time and never let us know how hard that is. Like, we had to grow up and become adults to realize, holy shit, like what she did for us, to be able to like carry kind of the light of our own childhood into our adulthood. She, it was something that she gave us with such generosity, so much space to just stay connected to, your inner child and your heart. And I think that is like, probably the hardest thing to do, honestly, in our cold, hard world that we live in.
Absolutely. And oh gosh, so many parallels in our lives. So I'm hearing raised by a single mom here in Colorado Springs, older sister, younger brother.
Yes.
That's my life story too.
Oh,
Single
wonder
mom.
where to
Yeah,
go.
right. Kindred spirits. So I was raised by a single mom here in Colorado Springs. I'm the older sister. I've got a younger brother. But yeah, I can, like, as you're talking, Austin, it totally resonated because that was my mom too.
Really?
I never knew. I grew up like my younger years, basement apartment, downtown, down here, Colorado Springs. I lived in the hood, like ghetto. But my mom worked so hard to raise my brother and I. Eventually, we were able to, she got a promotion at work and we were able to move to a little bit nicer area. And then, here she is, gosh, 67 and has been retired for 8 or 9 years and did it all on her own.
Good for her.
I know. Yeah. Great moms, huh?
Yeah. I think about her a lot because we, and it does. I think those formative years again, they show up in how you do these things. And I think of her, if something very upsetting or triggering happened with kids at school or this or that, and I just want to be mad and whatever. And she'd just be like, she always would be like, yes, and she could have this compassionate, but I also feel sorry for her because her mom, or her, and she had this way of being caring with us, but also getting us to be like, oh, this person is coming from somewhere too. And I think that is something that it just really informs both of us in our worldview and our leadership view, because you'll get emails. I've had a couple just this week, as a matter of fact, that can be triggering, where you're just like, oh my gosh, this person doesn't get what we're doing, and they're upset, and we've worked so hard, and we've bent over backwards. It's, and you can instantly just go into this like the place, and then it's like, if you can soften up, you can usually see this person is asking to be heard. Yeah. This person's asking to participate in the community still, but they don't know how. Yeah. And so when you can kind of, I think we learned a lot of skills around it's still hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but just softening around that.
Mm-hmm.
Full circle leadership perception, kind of back to where our conversation started. Yeah. She's the one who taught you that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think, too, what Amber, for me, has been a great example and role model of leadership, because she gets that in a way that she has to continually remind me of that, number one. And number two, affords the whole structure of the company to operate in a way where, if you're really going to put a label on it, we're not doing what we do, again, to get rich. We want to keep the business solvent. We want to make enough money to keep this service growing and at a high quality. Like, that's a big deal to us. But I think so many businesses get into the trap of, if money is kind of the focal point, at a certain point you can't help but get into win-lose situations. Yeah. And what we're always trying to do is create a win-win scenario. Yeah. And that's even with other yoga studios. You've spearheaded things with other local studios, especially, I remember during the pandemic, where we would, you organized community meetings with owners of other yoga studios to be like, hey, how can we work together? How can we stick together to make it through this together? And, a lot of those studios did not make it. But our philosophy in terms of that has always been like, let's just grow the pie together, rather than there's only so many slices of pie here. Yeah. But that kind of, for lack of a better term, like abundant mindset thinking, we're always pointed in the direction of win-win with that. And that's something that it's a real freedom to be guided by that. And I think it's a lesson you learn from Mom, but you espouse it, you embody it in a way that is definitely the leadership of Cambio.
Well, that's sweet. I feel, and see, it's funny because then I could just go on about him and how I think that's what works, is we have such a true mutual admiration for one another. And I'm always just today talking about a situation, he brought me to such a place of like calm and compassion around it. Whereas I knew I needed to get there, but I was caught up in my, in fear and emotions and things. So,
We're like a ballast for each other.
We really are. We learn to, when you're siblings, you kind of either have to learn to work together or not. Yeah. And so we started young with figuring out how to work together. But and I just wanted to add too, I think having a mission has been so key to all of those, because that's what we bounce every decision off of, is this making the mission to make yoga accessible? Is it adding to education? Is it adding to community? And if it's not, then it's not worth it. And so that's
really way more important than our feelings, our ego. And sometimes that isn't an issue, but sometimes you do take things personal and you're like,
You have to shut your mouth
Damn
a
it.
lot.
Well, that for sure. For
You do
sure.
and just be like, oh, like, I mean, can I give a quick example?
Please
Yeah.
do.
I had an email that from someone who was upset about, wanting something and this and that, and we've been through this with this person, and here's what we'll do for you, and here's what and then all of this, and I wrote an email, and it was a little triggered, I could tell. So I calmed down. I got to a place, and I wrote another one. I'm like, nope, I'm still getting my digs in. Like I could not. So I was like, Austin, please help me. And so he helped me, and he's like, you got to take that out. You got to, but it is like you have to. It can't be about winning. You personally, it can't be about winning a fight or an argument or a position or anything else.
Yeah.
So I'm curious in this world, you guys are adopting this very different model of doing business, right? This donation-based, community-focused, not focusing just on the wins. Again, what are some of those challenges you guys have felt in maybe just even the donation-based side of things? I'm really curious about that as we listen to a lot of, business owners and how to grow a business. But what have you guys learned about the donation-based side of things?
I've got a big one.
Yeah.
That always gets in my craw, which is because when we started out early, I didn't realize this was going to be such a big deal because there's a stigma around the value of something according to its cost. So, and they've done, there's sociological studies around this where if you and I buy the same car and you find out you paid $7,000 more for it, you're going to create a confirmational biased narrative in your brain to justify to yourself why yours is actually worth more than mine, even though it's the same exact thing. So when we started donation-based yoga, I wasn't aware of this, and there was a lot of prejudice that it's like, oh, if I'm not paying an arm and a leg for yoga, it must be low quality yoga. So early days, I was on a hell-bent mission to be like, oh, this is quality yoga and this is every bit as good as, and to the extent that I was trying to do more than what really became our focus around what we were doing. And, but no, I think that to me, that's a big, success for us is a range. And that I think is another reason why we've been successful as a small business. If you pinpoint success as one thing, and if you don't hit that one bullseye, everything else dies, that's just hamstringing. And so for me, a big stigma around changing people's perceptions that things are, the value of something is not inherent to what you're being charged for it. It's not equal to cost.
Yeah. Well, I think another perception too that we had to deal with and contend with a lot, especially early on, was what donation meant. It was equated in a lot of people's minds to free. And along with that, I remember in the early days having people come in and literally say things, and this was from more than one person, saying, oh, this is so great, yoga should be free. Yoga should be free was a phrase I heard a lot. And while, yes, I believe it should be accessible, I also, there's rent. There's teachers should be paid. There's so much more to it, but there's had to be, and people just in general culturally that's changed too, I think. But I think there's just there's always a reassessment of how are we educating our community around what donation actually, what does that actually mean? And what does that look like? So.
How do you educate your community on that? Because I could see how they jump to the free perception, and then you've got all these people coming and going and not dropping a donation into the donation bucket.
Well, for one thing, all of our education, we really see regulars at the studio as well as teachers as stewards. We use that term a lot. They're stewards of our community. So our job is to make sure that other stewards really, if they understand it, then it gets, that message gets across.
Yeah.
Because they're really, the teachers are the ones the students are seeing, or even the students who are there a lot and who love it and want to help us take care of it. They're the ones educating other students. So I think that's really a huge piece of it, is just making sure, and that's a constant ongoing thing, because of course there's new teachers coming in, teachers going out, and community members changing. I mean, in Colorado Springs, it's such a, I mean, people, we have a lot of military, and people just come and go a lot. So it's just a constant, And also reassessing like what's the perception of it now and how does it need to shift, our education shift around that. Teachers in the old days used to feel bad asking for money for their classes.
Yeah.
And so just even getting to where like it's okay to ask people to pay for a
Well,
class.
we've worked specifically with languaging around it in a way that supports the teacher to not feel like they're in some kind of putting some imposition on people. So we've also helped kind of like script out how to have that transactional conversation in a way that is non-judgmental and not awkward or cringy and really actually empowering for both people.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
It's taken some work.
Would you
I'm sure.
break that down I'm curious, just from like an advice perspective, right? These lessons that you guys have learned for other small business owners, I think there's this principle of how do you ask for money on some level? Because the donation isn't asked, right? Whether you're selling something with a set price or something that's donation, I think there's a lot to learn from what you guys are doing. So how do you do that? Can you break that down just a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's really just about having it stated simply and treating the person without any prejudice and saying, how would you like to donate? It's literally that simple sentence. And then, by the way, how you respond to whatever they say. So no matter what they say, if they're like $5 or $15, you say, great, thank you so much. And you just, you emphasize that their donation matters. And so it's really about just being like, there's no charge to the question. Like there's just no emotion behind just, how would you like to donate today? You know, you just, you give it to them as like a, you know, this is your world. We're just living in it. Tell me how you want to show up, you know? And then you just confirm that like whatever they can give is more than acceptable. It's great. It's, you know, it's appreciated.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever received like a mind-blowing donation? Like, where in the world did
Oh,
that
that'd be
come from?
nice.
We've had some certainly very generous ones, but
No,
I
not
wouldn't
life-changing.
say nothing.
No life-changing donations. No.
Yeah, like when you hear about the tip, the
Yeah.
$1,000
Yeah.
tip or something. Yeah,
No.
but we have. I mean, I've there's been some very generous ones.
Yeah,
for sure.
there was a gal who moved to California who left us something in the triple digits, which was very generous.
And we
were
and during
That is.
COVID, there were people who I know stepped it up and did more and things like that.
You know, we have people all the time who, in our teacher training, we have a sliding scale for our payment where you can take a scholarship or give a scholarship. And part of our languaging that is kind of funneled through that is there's no application for the take a scholarship. And there's no questions asked. And we're very frank about that. We're like, hey, if you need to take a lower price point for this, we have a scale that slides. But, you know, if you go to the low end, okay, then that's what it is. You just tell me, and there's no big deal about it. But you know, we have also the giver scholarship, and recently we had somebody who went above and beyond that, and that was really like, wow, like, you know. So people tend to get it, and I think when they get it, there's also a appetite for transacting in the world in a different way than everything just being about bottom line capitalism that is refreshing for people, that they want to engage with the services and goods that they're voting with their dollar for in ways where they're not just a number. They're not just a client. They're part of, you know, a concept or ideal mission community that is greater than, you know, a figure.
Yeah, they're contributing, and they really are, and that's something too. I think that's important is. The concept works because people care about it and they take ownership in it too. And so there's a lot of languaging around that and stewardship and things that help with all of that. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay, so we started with Austin's. Then we kind of moved into some really good conversation. But I want to circle back around to you, Amber, and talk about your leadership
Right.
epiphanies and moments.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, as I mentioned, one is, of course, like just really having to get comfortable. I wouldn't say comfortable, but accepting the fact that, like, I'm really not going to make everyone happy. And that's okay because we have a vision and we have this thing we're caring for. I don't even see it as mine or his. It's this thing outside of us that it's our job to care for and to tend to. But one of the things that I think, and I think there's kind of this idea of what a business owner should be, and I kind of alluded to this a little earlier, and maybe because there are so many, typically in our culture, we see it as like a manly man kind of thing, and this kind of like, especially growing up, I mean, I'm 49 years old, I grew up a lot in the 80s, and it was like guys in red cars, driving their sports cars, and being, having their briefcases and their shoulder pads, and like, I don't know what all's gotten in there or why, but but it's there, unfortunately, at times. And really just having this idea of what a business owner should be, and again coming against the fact that I'm not that.
Yeah.
And that actually, and this is something I talk to teacher trainees about a lot, because, and younger, or I should say newer teachers, a lot of times it's those things where you feel like it makes you different or makes you, not the ideal or the picture perfect version of something that actually is what you have to contribute. Like it's that thing that is your, as Austin says sometimes, your special sauce. And so for me, like, and so within that, realizing I don't have to know all the questions about technology. Now in the early days, we both had to kind of know it all. We had to be plumbers. We had to be the IT people. We had to be carpenters. We had to be, and letting that go, and not out of a sense of control, because it was never, I'm not a micromanager. Anyone who's ever worked for me will tell you I really believe in giving people space. I'm a former classroom teacher, and I think it's that like Montessori thing, like people, when we give them the right amount of space and the right amount of support, they really thrive. But so it's not about control, but it is about my own standards for myself that I come up against. And slowly, we always hear like you should delegate and do this and that, and you don't have to do everything. But to actually take that in when there's this image of, people out there, business owners and entrepreneurs, they have to hustle.
Yeah, the hustle
That
culture.
hustle culture
Yeah.
to me is so, it kills my soul. And yet many times I've gotten caught in that standard of I should be doing more. I should be killing myself over this, literally. And it's like, and there are plenty of times where you do have to kill yourself over it just about anyway.
You do.
It's so you don't need to give yourself those times additionally, and just realizing there are places where I can contribute something that only I can contribute. And then there's a lot of places where the whole business is better off if I just say, let's let you do that.
Yes.
Like, this is great. I don't, and I think a real point where that came up was when I decided to not teach public classes anymore, other than with teacher training. I love teacher training, still something I'm very involved with, but I had it so much in my mind. I'm a yoga studio owner. I should be teaching, in the early days, gosh, I was still teaching 5th grade full time when we opened, and teaching 12 or so classes a week. I mean, it was insane.
Wow.
And so you ratchet yourself up to here, and you think you have to stay at this level, but then other things start demanding more, and it's just not sustainable. Wow. So you have to, and at some point it was like, wait, I don't have to teach a single class if I don't want to, because it had gotten to the point where I was down to where I only had time for one a week, and it became such a stressor for me, because you're actually better teaching 2 or 3 classes because it's easier. Yeah. Like otherwise it's like you prepare for it and then you have 5 days to forget how to teach. Yep. And then you have to gear yourself back up. And it's really, I'd have 2 days before my class where I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have to start prepping for this class and getting ready. And it became such a stress point that when I let it go, there was guilt around it, but it was also like, wait, I have these amazing people teaching classes. Like, I believe in our teachers so much that if it's making me miserable and sick to do something, that's not contributing to Cambio. Yeah. That is doing nothing for our community. Like, my role is to then support them to get out there and do the best they can do. Yeah. And so just realizing culturally what's expected isn't necessarily what's going to fit for who I am and how I need to do this to survive it and do it well.
Even if it's a imagined
and sometimes
ideal
it's
of
imagined.
cultural. Yeah,
yes.
it's like your own,
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times it is too. So for me, that's been a real, and I would say that that's the point. We were talking about that the other day. Is really being like, it getting behind the scenes more, not being as much, and that's always been to an extent intentional. It's not about having some superstar yoga teacher who the studio is all framed around, but just putting other people out there has felt really good.
Isn't it funny how we get caught up in this role of societal expectations? Yeah. But especially for entrepreneurs at our core, we're rule breakers. We usually go against the societal expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like, you guys even alluded to it when you guys first started Cambio. A lot of people said, Psh, that's never going to work.
Including me.
And the small business center, we got laughed at the small business center.
See,
right.
HR branches, same story. I remember going to friends and family saying, I'm going to start an HR firm and I'm going to help small businesses. They're like, small businesses don't need help with HR. And I'm like, yeah, they do. They do.
Yes.
And I was told so many times it was never going to work. Got laughed out of the room just like you guys. But I think it's our innate core that drives us to break those rules and see what does work. But then we still get stuck in that societal expectation of what is a business owner, what is that definition of success? What is, your working hours? And it's interesting.
It's unique to humans because it's like you outgrew a role. And like I think about like a lizard, when they outgrow their tail and it pops off, the lizard doesn't reach back and grab the tail and go, I'm supposed to carry this thing now, right? Like, yeah. But humans, we're like, we're not quite as smart as lizards.
Yeah. Maybe we need to learn something from them.
The snakeskin is all, I will not shed this.
Yes.
I won't shed the snakeskin. Yeah.
Wow. So Amber, did you have a moment of recognition in all of this? Because I think when you're in the thick of trying to be that person to do all the things, and then there is that transition. You said in the early days, you had to do it all. It's just kind of the way it goes, right? You do it all, and then you bring people on, and I think every entrepreneur, as you grow, goes through this, which is such a great discussion that I'm excited to kind of get into, is you hit a point. You bring people in, but then you have your own mindset. And whether it's the societal expectations, your own expectations, or control issues, it's hard to hand stuff over to people and then trust them. And you kind of have to have that awakening moment of, just like you said, I trust my people. I want them to succeed. I want them to thrive. Do you have that moment where you're like, aha, I get it?
I think there's been many moments like that along the way.
Yeah.
And I can't point to just one where it turned on, but I think we help each other reach those moments a lot too. We're both very aware of that and the necessity for it. But it is there, there's just a real practice. There has to be this living a bit in the unknown.
Yeah.
And that is hard, right? Because we want to know, well, how's this going to turn out? Or how's this person going to do here? Or what's going to happen if I let this go? And there just has to be a bit of trust in what you've done, what you've built, about, in our situation, around the community, around the people we know who are contributing to it and working at Cambio and doing so much. Just it's when I feel myself getting like, I like get tight, then I have to like kind of ease into like, okay, I don't know the outcome of this, but I never have. Not in 15 and a half years have I ever, even when I thought I knew, I was usually pretty wrong. So I think for me, there's this continuing to kind of soften into the question of things, if that makes sense.
It does.
Can you guys think of an example? And this is kind of going back to what you were saying a little bit ago, Austin, is this idea of a community, like it's not really for you anymore, right? Like it's this thing.
Not in the way.
Right.
Yeah.
So where did you guys put maybe an intention or direction on something, but then the community took that and evolved it in a direction that was better than maybe what you thought it was going to be in the beginning?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that happens all the time. I think that's kind of the mark of good leadership, I think, in a way, is where you recognize that it's a social process, that a lot of your role is about role modelship. And if you're doing that well, what you're doing is not only repeatable and imitatable, but should serve as kind of like a ramp, an off ramp for people to reach higher heights. So, like we have, how many teachers do we have right now?
Close to 60 were usually
Yeah.
around. Yeah.
So, early days, like that whole mission of like proving to the world that like, oh yeah, donation yoga is badass. Trust me. Come on, try me. This is the best in yoga. You can't even touch this.
some wine.
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Have some wine.
Yeah. Carve a pumpkin. Get your ass in here. and then to realize, like slowly but surely, it's like, oh, not only can you not do this alone, like the message we keep coming back to, but like, the more you don't do this alone, the better off it will be. And it's literally just creating space, stepping aside, and enabling people to, and I will say, like, I will back Amber up 100%. She is not a micromanager. She is a great leader in the way that she enables people to find their interests, passions, and own skin in the game so that they go above and beyond just naturally. I think that's the thing, is that like early days, we were the ones who thought, well, make or break this place is going to be about us going above and beyond. And we didn't realize that, it's not about hiring your friend to be here. It's about hiring the people who are mission-minded, because those are the people that when you give them some of this real estate, they're going to just go above and beyond. Yeah. And so in every single way, and there's not one, in every single way, everything we've ever laid out and done has been outdone by our people. Like, yeah, I see teachers, the way that they even just mingle with their students after class, and I'm like continually learning from it. And I watch and I say, oh, I need to start doing that. Like they're doing that better than I even realized. Like the way that they're showing a vulnerability by just presenting themselves after class to maintain that presence and carry the experience beyond just the doors of the studio. It's like, we're continually being taught by them now in ways where, that's what I mean by it's a social process, because they lead us, we, open the door, but I don't know how much we're leading them now. But we are in a distinct position where we can point out the things that are happening that are really good, and then kind of just tether those things back into the culture so they become organic.
I keep seeing this vision of this bountiful garden, and you guys are in your overalls just tending to the garden as the gardeners. Cambio has really just taken on a life of its own. It's become its own living organism, which is truly the sign of incredible leaders. So through this whole leadership journey, what were your lessons learned? Do you guys have like maybe a big takeaway or a couple takeaways? What are the big lessons? And then we'll jump into advice for our listeners here in a moment.
Well, I think we've kind of, and I know we're bad about staying on topic because we've kind of been talking about these things.
Yeah.
But, I think big lessons are to, if you don't have a mission, know your values and weigh everything against that. So even like Austin was saying, is this person right? A person can seem really right for a job, but are they right for the mission?
Yeah.
Because that's a part of it too. And every decision, I think leaning on that mission more and more and more has been really one of my biggest lessons. And also just, like I was saying, just granting myself grace. Yeah. And realizing that you have to realize it's going to be messy and it's going to be imperfect. And what can you take from that? Because if you're not taking from it, then it is just a sticking point. But it's like, I will say, I think one thing we've done well is even when we've done things poorly, right? Like handled a discussion poorly or whatever, we have never stopped self-assessing. And yep. Not in a way, again, you want to grant yourself grace, but you also have to be like, but where can I take this so I don't do that thing again? Yeah.
So well said. I forgot the question. What is the biggest thing I've learned about leadership? Lessons learned. Yeah. I mean, I love that idea that trusting people and filling out the people around you with the freedom to allow them to rise to their own level of skill and interest, and recognizing that, like, for me, out of the broad spectrum of everything that I've ever had to do at Cambio, I probably do 10% of it really well. And the more that we have created community at every level, from the students to the teachers to the teacher training faculty to administrative stuff, to bringing people on like you who have our back, that we get into sticky things where we're just like, we don't know what to do in this situation. It's like the biggest relief to realize, like, we don't have to pretend to be experts at anything that we're not good at anymore. Yeah. And to really, like, collaborate, co-create with people who know that shit. Yeah. And that is just like, we have a deep bench now of people who, like, we trust. Like, we'll just email you and be like, cool, I don't have to worry about this because I know they got us on this, and they're going to come back with something that's just going to be exactly what is right for, again, even the mission, because you guys get us. Like, we're, that going back to the mission continually just gets that so clear in all of our relationships, that's what we're doing here in this relationship. We're not here to make as much money as possible. We're not here to win and other people lose. We're here to uphold these guiding principles, and the more that we kind of radiate that through our relationships, that's the ground of the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here because I think this is important, and I hope you guys don't mind me doing this. Mission and values are so important, but oftentimes so misunderstood. And when they're used right, they are a game changer. But when they're used wrong, they'll destroy any business. We've all seen the words on the wall. They do more harm than good when they're not used right. So I hope you don't mind me doing this, but I'm excited to go down this path because I don't hear of mission and values used in small business as effectively as you guys use yours. And so if you don't mind me picking your brain here, talk to me about how you developed your mission and or values, whatever mission is probably your guiding light, your North Star for you guys. And how do you actually use it and use it well? I heard decision making and hiring, but kind of just as succinctly as you can, if that's a possibility, because it's a big, wide topic. Is there? Tell me about that.
How do we come about it?
Well, I think for one, it's important to note that we don't have business degrees. We don't have corporate backgrounds, and I think that's been an advantage in this sense.
I agree.
My background's in education, so a lot, I think, of it is from, when you're an educator, you want your students to feel included and like they belong. So that's just, it's a part of knowing who you are and what you value and the thing that you bring to everything you do, even when you're not trying. And so when you can kind of identify that within yourself, that's the thing that, like, your soul cries to do, right? And for me, it's like, I want people to feel belonging. I want people to come in and just be like, oh my gosh, I've wanted to do yoga and it was so scary and I'm here and I'm so glad I came. Like, that to me, like, I get emotional just talking about it. And so it's, I think, first identify, and he has similar things. His are a little different, but they're enough that, first off, we never had a business plan. We just were like, we had a mission and then didn't know how the hell we were going to do it. And the mission just came about so organically. It wasn't like we sat down and we're like, well, we really need to have a driving mission. It just came about organically from our own drive to do certain things. And so I think it needs to be heartfelt. And not this thing outside yourself where you think it's a should for you. Right? Like, this should be what I want to do. No, it's usually that thing that you're doing everywhere you go since childhood.
It is what you do.
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah,
that. Okay.
and it's like, how can you then bring it into this context of your business? Because that's what you need to be doing. In yoga, we talk about dharma, which is like your way of contributing to and upholding the highest good. Your swadharma is your personal way of doing that. And the thing is if I'm trying to do it like you're doing it, or this corporation or yoga studio down the street is, I'm not doing mine. And so it's got to uphold the highest good, and it's got to be something only you can really do. And I think that then within that, if you don't hold too tightly, then people can find their own pieces of that too, their own ways to be a part and to contribute and to bring their missions to it too. Because it's like there's this umbrella of the business's mission, but I think everyone contributing to it, it's broad enough and heartfelt enough that it's received well. It's sincere in the way we present it and the way we act. That's the thing too. It means nothing if you're not sincere and you're just, you're phony and you're not genuinely like hiring people who, when people come in the door, they're just welcoming. So when you have that, then there's room for other people's swadharmas or missions too. And I think then things just start to pop. I kind of went off.
I love
Did
that.
Did I
Swadharma. That's my new word of the day.
Swadharma, yeah.
Swadharma, yeah.
Did I say it right? Spadharma.
You're popping off. Yes.
All right, got it. Wow. So you guys use it in decision making, building your culture, hiring. What else do you guys use it in? Community.
I think communication. I think especially it's important during when you have a moral dilemma or an ethical dilemma, as we all have as leaders, where you're not sure exactly the right thing, and then it's like, okay, well, it's the measuring stick for all things. And when it's pure and when there's seeds of selflessness in it, then you're really not going to go wrong with it. You're not. I need to wake up and live with myself. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have regrets and I have handled every situation perfectly, but it does mean that, like, if it means we don't always make the best money-making decisions. And that's sometimes hard, I think, for people in the business world to hear. And I also know we're lucky to be in that position, because there's businesses who really have had great missions and it hasn't worked for them. So there's also just, honestly, there's just some luck and timing and all of that with it too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad luck and timing and missions all working out.
Yeah,
The community's better for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way to check our privilege in that, because the privilege is to not always be driven by money, and that we can make decisions. But that's also a conscious choice we made. We started at the same time. Another yoga studio I know started, and they have over 200 studios nationwide now. And, great for them. That was their mission. Our mission was something that has not led us down that road. And so, like Amber said, I think that there's different types of wealth, just how you sleep at night.
Yeah.
How you sleep at night. Like, for us, you can still have pretty sleepless nights on a mattress full of cash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
and you can sleep pretty good when you are in alignment with your swadharma, and maybe you're not living the cultural hustle, the culture hustle dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, hustler dream. What am I trying to say?
Hustler?
Like being an American hustler, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if an entrepreneur would look at us and be like, no, I think most people get into business to become rich or to become extremely financially wealthy. And like, if that would have happened, great. But we always put the mission first, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs admire you too. So,
Wow.
Well, that is kind. Thank you.
But it's an interesting thing, because you do kind of have to choose sometimes. And I've met a lot of really successful, rich people who are not happy.
yeah.
You
They're not successful in that regard.
No, in that regard, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for us, maybe it's because we have this sibling language and care that our mom taught us, going back to that leadership, that like I said, our mom never let on that we weren't, struggling, and we were.
Yeah.
But leading with love was the lesson she gave us. And so, ultimately, if you want to boil it down, those 3 guiding principles of yoga, education, and accessibility, or community, education, accessibility, they're baked in love, and that's kind of how we try to lead. And I think that's not always easy in business.
No, it's not.
Because it's scary, a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even with love doesn't always mean that you're nice. Right?
Oh, no.
Yes.
Yeah.
You still have boundaries.
A big lesson
and,
too.
Yeah.
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 And you have to
So-
say no or do, yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So advice time. What advice would you give to our listeners when it comes to leadership and your experiences and building up Cambio?
Oh boy. Do you have one off the top of your head?
Yeah, well, I just think, I think putting the mission before your ego, number 1. Number 2, really making sure that the people who are in on the mission with you know how much you care about them. But by the way, it's like you said with caring, it's like, that doesn't mean they can walk all over and do whatever they want. But that's, recognizing roles and expectations too, in terms of the context of what is this conversation we're having as employer and employee. We're talking about fostering, growing, and building a mission that is, the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just really second that. I think it's around, I think figure out, if not your mission, your true values, and really let that be just your center point, and let the rest kind of come out from there.
I hear leadership with love and a guiding light. That's just pretty special. Sings to my heart.
It sounds easier than it is.
Well, it requires embodiment. I think that's the kind of word that's been circling for me, is like, it's one thing to have your mission statement on the wall. It's another thing, do you embody that mission statement?
Yes.
Do you live it? Is it something that someone can see in your life and how you're showing up and the values, like you've been saying? Is it the filter by which you make all of your decisions? When those 2 things happen, all of a sudden, it's actually coming to life. Versus a mission statement that's just written on a wall that nobody's embodying and they're doing something else, then it creates that weird friction of like, what are we doing? Or, if the owner's embodiment is just to make money, great. Can we just own that? Is our mission?
Right.
Can our mission just be make a shit ton of money? Like, great.
honest?
No,
Let's be honest about
exactly.
what we're here doing and why we're doing it. And I think if we'd be more honest about those things, that would show up in your life, right?
Yeah, and I think that, it's not just a platitude on the wall. It's something that comes hard earned. And so when you, as a business owner, figure out what your mission is, it's going to take you on a ride that is going to teach you things that you don't know what you're signing up for when you sign up for it. It's going to grow you in ways where you're like, this is the absolute hardest thing I could have chosen. And yet you don't have another choice.
Yeah.
Right. And the most fulfilling then because of that too.
So
because
satisfying.
of that.
It
So
is.
satisfying.
And it invites the right people along for the journey too.
Yes.
Right. When you have that right mission, those right values, and they're not transcribed on the wall, they're implanted in someone's heart, everybody's heart, you invite the right people to come along and you repel the wrong. So,
Well, and some of those people, those right people, show us the next steps in it, and because they embody it so well in ways that we're just like, whoa, I didn't even realize it was beyond the scope of our imagination. So, I'm telling you, we have been taught more from the stewards than. So it's hard, you say, what's the juiciest mistakes? And it's like, we've honestly been taught more from the kind of happenstance of just being pretty singularly focused and it attracting the right people and them also embodying it in a way where they role model it to us. And we just go, oh, we'll let you take the lead here and we'll follow your footsteps.
right? You could do this way better than me. Amber, Austin, thank you so much. I could sit here and talk with you guys for another 2 hours, but you guys have 2 studios to run. So, and a mission to fulfill and a community to lead and, nothing else going on in your lives. But thank you so much for joining us today and showing us all of the wonderful journey that you guys have gone through. And just your openness and also your friendship. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
this
thanks
has
for being
been
here.
so much fun. It's
So-
a joy.
Can you do me a favor and tell our viewers and listeners and our guests here, how in the world do they get a hold of you, join your community? What can they do to support your community and your mission?
Yeah, sure. Well, come take some yoga with us. I think too, it's important to note we really love beginners. So if you're scared of it, if you're intimidated by it, if you think it's not for you, if you don't feel like you have the right whatever, first step is really just be brave. We'll take good care of you. Our website is cambioyoga.com. We have amazing people answering our phone. That's 719-229-1188. I'm so proud of myself for reading
Nice.
It's not a hard number, and it always escapes my brain. And what else?
Instagram, Facebook, if you follow.
Yeah,
them
Cambio Yoga on any of those too. So.
But yeah, I mean, we've got 80 some classes a week. Wide variability. I'm losing the ability to speak.
Talking a lot.
Variability. What is the word?
Variety.
Variety.
Yeah.
Available. Variety available
Yeah.
of classes, like different styles, different times. That's part of the accessibility too. And online, we've got on-demand classes, both live and ones that you can take that are in the archive. Teacher trainings.
Yeah.
Workshops, things from sound baths to mantra classes to like last week we had a headstand and shoulder stand class and a Sanskrit class. I mean, our teachers are always bringing it with like really creative offerings for our community.
Yeah.
So it's on the website, but it's always kind of revolving of like fresh new offerings always happening.
And if I can just add, I think too, we have so many classes that can be overwhelming. So if you see that and you're like, where do I begin? Call that number or info@cambioyoga.com and we'll help you find a class too that's right for you, because you can look at that and be like, what is this? And then you read the description and you're like, I'm even more confused. And so we try to be clear, but it can be, when it's not your world and your language, it can be confusing. So
Definitely can be. Well,
Yeah.
definitely take my friends up on their generous offer to help you figure out the first step in your yoga journey, as well as your exploration of your leadership journey too. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you
much.
guys.
It was so much fun. Thank you.
Stay tuned for our next episode of Show Me Yours, where we will be diving in with a future guest. I forget who it is, so we'll find out. It'll be a surprise for all of us. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.